Imperial China is often remembered for its grandeur, the towering Great Wall, majestic palaces, and a civilization that stretched for thousands of years. Yet, beyond the awe-inspiring monuments and ancient philosophy lies a daily life so structured, so demanding and so unforgiving that you, living in modern times, would likely find it impossible to survive even a single day. This is not because of war or invasion, but because of the sheer grind of ordinary existence, under the weight of centuries-old tradition and strict social order. You wake before dawn, in a small, crowded village house made of mud bricks and wood, with barely enough room for your family. Your body aches from yesterday's labor in the fields, but the day ahead allows no rest. Imperial China, particularly during the Ming 1368-1644 and Qing 1644-1912 dynasties, was governed by an unyielding Confucian ethic that demanded discipline, hierarchy, and absolute respect for authority. Every person's role was predetermined, their path constrained by rigid customs. The backbone of Chinese society was the peasant farmer, who made up about 80% of the population. Yet life for these farmers was far from idyllic pastoral scenes. They worked from sunrise to sunset, cultivating rice, millet, or wheat depending on the region, battling floods, droughts, pests, and poor soil. Farming techniques were basic: no mechanized tools, no chemical fertilizers. Every step involved back-breaking manual labor. You are expected to contribute a portion of your harvest as tax to the local government, sometimes as much as 40%, and, in years of famine or drought, even this meager amount was excruciatingly difficult to give. Failure to meet tax quotas could mean harsh punishment, including forced labor or imprisonment. Local magistrates often abused their power, demanding bribes or extra labor under the guise of loyalty to the emperor. Daily survival involved careful rationing of food and water. Meals consisted mainly of millet porridge and a small amount of vegetables, with meat reserved only for festivals or emergencies. You might also have to share your food with a large family, and extended relatives crammed into one room, leaving you perpetually hungry and exhausted. Beyond farming, you live in a society tightly bound by Confucian ideals, where filial piety and social hierarchy shape every interaction. Respect for elders and authority figures isn't just polite, it's mandatory. Disobedience is met with swift, often brutal consequences. Women, in particular, bear heavy burdens, confined largely to the home and expected to bear sons to continue the family line. Foot binding, a painful and crippling practice designed to restrict women's mobility, was widespread, a daily reminder of the limitations placed upon half the population. Education is reserved for a privileged few. The imperial examination system selects a tiny elite to serve as bureaucrats, requiring years of memorization and study. For you, this is not an option. Illiteracy is common, and your life is focused on survival, not scholarship. The rhythm of life is relentless. Festivals and holidays provide brief respite, but they too are structured by elaborate rituals and strict rules. The Lunar New Year, for example, requires extensive preparation, from cleaning the house to buying offerings for ancestors. Illness is another constant threat. Without modern medicine, minor infections or injuries can be fatal. Herbal remedies and acupuncture are used, but their effectiveness varies and many live in fear of the next illness. Clean water is scarce and sanitation is rudimentary, further increasing disease risk. The emperor's presence looms large but distant. While you likely never see him, his influence is felt everywhere. From the officials collecting taxes to the soldiers enforcing order, the vast bureaucracy is designed to maintain stability, but its complexity means that corruption and inefficiency are common, often worsening life for the common people. Would you be able to endure this day-to-day existence? Could you cope with the endless work, the social constraints, the scarcity of food and medicine? Would you find the strength to survive in a world where every breath feels like a battle and where tradition is a cage as much as it is a guide? Or would you crumble under the weight of imperial expectations and the relentless cycle of survival? This is the question that lingers as the sun rises again, signaling another day in the vast ancient empire of China. Continuing from the grueling daily life of the common people, let's now turn our attention to the vast machinery that governed Imperial China, the imperial bureaucracy. This was not just a government but a sprawling, multi-layered system designed to control every aspect of life, from tax collection to law enforcement, education to social behavior. The complexity and rigidity of this system would itself be enough to overwhelm anyone unfamiliar with its inner workings. Imagine yourself now as a low-level government clerk or a village official, sometimes called a mandarin, tasked with enforcing the emperor's will. You have little power but are held accountable for the population under your supervision. Your life revolves around filling out endless forms, attending to petitions, managing disputes and ensuring taxes are collected on time. The imperial exam you passed was brutal, focusing on memorization of Confucian texts, classical poetry, and legal codes. Passing it didn't mean an easy life, but rather a lifetime of servitude to the state. The bureaucracy extended down from the capital, Beijing, through provinces, prefectures, counties, and villages, each level with officials, overseeing the next. At the village level, you are often the first and sometimes only face of authority. Peasants come to you to report grievances or seek favors, but your resources are limited. To meet the demands of your superiors, you might pressure villagers to pay taxes or provide labor, sometimes beyond their means. This system, while sophisticated, was prone to dysfunction. Corruption was endemic, with many officials demanding bribes or misreporting data to cover their failures. For you, caught between your duty and the desperation of the people, this is a constant source of stress. Punishments for corruption could be severe, yet enforcement was uneven. You live in fear of being accused yourself. Your role also involves maintaining social order. The emperor's rule depended on Confucian ideals of hierarchy, obedience, and moral conduct. You oversee local rituals, ensure adherence to laws governing behavior, such as prohibitions against gambling, adultery, or disrespect to elders, and sometimes organize collective punishments when families or communities transgress. At times, your life requires you to supervise forced labor projects. The emperor's grand construction ambitions, roads, canals, palaces, demand manpower. Villagers are conscripted for months or years, often under brutal conditions. As the official responsible for sending laborers, you bear the brunt of their complaints and resentment. Beyond governance, the imperial court enforced a rigid social class structure. Society was divided into the 4 traditional classes: scholars, peasants, artisans, and merchants. Each class had prescribed roles and limitations. Merchants, despite often being wealthy, were considered the lowest socially, barred from holding government office. Peasants, meanwhile, were idealized in Confucian thought as the backbone of the nation, but in practice bore heavy burdens. Life was further complicated by the one-child customs, or later population controls, clan loyalties, and arranged marriages. Women, confined largely to domestic roles, had little agency, and their lives were often dictated by these social arrangements. Religion and superstition played subtle but important roles. While Confucianism shaped government and social norms, Taoism and Buddhism permeated daily life. Temples, festivals, and rituals marked the calendar, and local gods or ancestor worship were vital to community cohesion. As an official, you might be responsible for organizing or overseeing these events, ensuring they did not conflict with imperial authority. Healthcare remained primitive. Herbalists and traditional medicine practitioners were common, but disease, outbreaks could devastate entire villages. The government sometimes organized large-scale public health campaigns, like smallpox inoculations, but these were rare and unevenly distributed. The educational system's exclusivity meant most people were illiterate, making you one of the few who could read and write official documents. This literacy, however, was a double-edged sword. It came with heavy responsibility and often social isolation. Given this, surviving as a low-level official or a commoner required not only physical endurance, but a deep understanding of social nuance, bureaucratic navigation, and the ability to endure long periods of hardship with little hope of advancement. Would you find yourself capable of navigating this intricate and unforgiving system? Could you balance loyalty to the emperor with empathy for the oppressed? Or would the crushing weight of responsibility and social pressure break your spirit? The unanswered complexity of this balance echoes through Imperial China's history. As the sun sets on your arduous day in Imperial China, it's clear that survival was never just about farming or paying taxes. It was a complex dance of endurance under a system that demanded absolute conformity, unwavering loyalty, and relentless labor from every citizen. The emperor's vast empire was held together by thousands of officials like you and millions of peasants, artisans, and merchants who each played a small, tightly controlled part in a grand but often unforgiving machine. The legacy of Imperial China is one of incredible endurance and adaptation. Over centuries, despite wars, famines, rebellions, and natural disasters, this civilization persisted. Yet the very structures that maintained order also limited personal freedom and imposed hardships that many modern people would find unbearable. This system fostered innovation in some areas, such as agriculture, papermaking, and governance, but it did so on the backs of a population whose daily lives were filled with monotony, strict rules, and often suffering. The rigid hierarchy and bureaucratic complexities ensured stability, but also bred corruption and stifled social mobility. Reflecting on this, you might ask yourself how much of our own modern systems still carry echoes of this past. Bureaucracies worldwide often frustrate and constrain individuals with red tape and hierarchy. Social inequalities and rigid traditions continue to impact millions. Imperial China's story reminds us of the resilience of ordinary people living under extraordinary constraints. It challenges us to appreciate the freedoms and conveniences we often take for granted today, while also acknowledging the human cost behind long-standing institutions. Would you last a day in Imperial China? Probably not. But understanding the endurance required offers a profound glimpse into the quiet struggles that shaped one of history's greatest civilizations, and how the mundane, often boring details of everyday survival tell the real story of human history. Picture yourself stepping down into the depths of a Victorian-era coal mine in 19th century Britain. The year is somewhere between 1830 and 1900, during the height of the Industrial Revolution, a time when coal powered the factories, steam engines, and the expanding railways that were transforming society. But this progress came at a steep cost, especially to the miners who extracted the black gold from the earth. As you descend the narrow shaft, you leave behind daylight, fresh air, and the world above. The mine's interior is cold, damp, and claustrophobic. The walls glisten with moisture, and the air is thick with dust, the smell of coal and the faint tang of explosives used to blast through rock. Your body immediately feels the weight of the low ceilings pressing down on you, forcing you to stoop or crawl. The workday stretches for up to 12 or even 14 hours. You are one of hundreds, perhaps thousands, squeezed into the dark tunnels, each person assigned a specific section or face where coal must be cut, loaded, and sent back to the surface. The tools are crude, hand picks, shovels, and carts pulled by small ponies or even children. Your muscles ache constantly. The work demands strength and stamina, but offers no respite. Every movement kicks up a cloud of coal dust that infiltrates your lungs. Over time, this dust causes black lung disease, a slow killer that suffocates miners through chronic respiratory illness. Safety is a near impossibility. The mine is prone to cave-ins, explosions caused by pockets of flammable methane gas and flooding. Lamp oil and open flames are common underground, increasing the risk of deadly fires. Ventilation shafts struggle to bring fresh air, and accidents are frequent. Your clothing is threadbare and soiled. Men, women, and even children work underground. Children as young as 5 or 6 might serve as trappers, opening and closing ventilation doors, or as hurriers, hauling coal carts along narrow passages. The law limits some of this child labor, but enforcement is lax. Above ground, miners live in cramped, squalid row houses clustered near the pit heads. These mining towns grow rapidly with the demand for coal, but sanitation, clean water and medical care lag far behind. Disease, malnutrition and early death are common. Wages are low and unstable, often based on the amount of coal extracted, rather than hourly pay. Employers control prices and housing, creating cycles of debt and dependence. Strikes and protests erupt periodically, but these are met with harsh repression. Your social world is tightly knit, centered around the union, halls, pubs and churches that offer brief moments of relief and community. Yet the daily grind underground defines life. You wake with aching limbs, descend again into darkness, and endure the endless, exhausting work demanded by the engine of industrial progress. Could you last a day in this unforgiving environment? Would your lungs hold out? Would your body and mind endure the claustrophobia, danger, and relentless fatigue? Or would you be swallowed whole by the shadows and silence beneath the earth? As you adjust to the grim reality underground, the true scale of the miner's hardships comes into sharper focus. The Victorian coal mine is not just a place of backbreaking labor. It is a crucible of constant danger, social struggle, and endurance. The physical toll is staggering. Coal dust clings to every surface, coating your skin, clothes, and lungs. Over time, this black dust accumulates, causing pneumoconiosis, commonly known as black lung disease, which slowly scars the lungs and suffocates its victims. Many miners never live long enough to see retirement, their bodies crushed by years of exposure. Accidents are frequent and often fatal. Explosions of methane gas, called fire damp, can tear through tunnels, killing scores of men, women, and children in seconds. Roof collapses trap workers underground, and flooding can drown entire crews. Safety measures exist on paper, but are rarely enforced due to cost and the relentless push for productivity. Your working conditions are compounded by poor ventilation. The stale air fills your lungs with noxious gases like carbon monoxide, often called white damp, which can render workers unconscious or kill without warning. Lamps flicker weakly in the darkness, barely illuminating the maze of tunnels you navigate daily. The social structure of mining communities offers some support, but also traps you in cycles of poverty and dependence. Miners often rent their homes from the mine owners or local landlords, who charge exorbitant rents and control access to stores that sell goods on credit. This company store system ensures that miners' wages flow back into the pockets of their employers, creating a near-feudal relationship. Child labor remains a dark reality. Despite legislative efforts such as the Mines Act of 1842, which banned women and boys under 10 from working underground, many children continue to work illegally or in poorly monitored conditions. These young workers endure the same hazards as adults, but with even less protection. The social fabric is tight but strained. Family life revolves around the mining schedule, with long hours underground leaving little time for rest or community engagement. Yet miners develop strong bonds forged in adversity, with trade unions and mutual aid societies offering hope for better conditions. Unionization is a slow, painful process. Early miners' associations face violent opposition from mine owners and government forces. Strikes, sometimes called pit strikes, disrupt the flow of coal and threaten the livelihoods of whole communities. In response, employers use strikebreakers, evict striking families from company housing, and employ armed police or military forces to maintain order. Despite these obstacles, miners persist in their fight for rights, safer working conditions, fairer wages and shorter hours. The activism leads to gradual reforms, including improved ventilation systems, safety lamps invented by Humphrey Davy, and government inspections. However, these changes come slowly and unevenly, often only after tragic disasters galvanize public attention. The psychological burden weighs heavily. You live with constant fear for your life and for your family's welfare. Yet many miners take pride in their essential role powering Britain's industrial dominance. This pride, mixed with a sense of solidarity, helps sustain the community through hardship. Would you be able to bear not only the physical exhaustion, but also the emotional strain and social uncertainty? Could you endure knowing that your life hangs by a thread every day and that your efforts feed a system that often treats you as expendable? Or would you break beneath the relentless pressure, swallowed by the darkness both literal and metaphorical? As the final shift of the day ends and you climb out of the mine, covered in coal dust and exhausted to your core, it's impossible to ignore the stark contrast between the life underground and the booming industrial world above. The factories, trains and cities powered by coal appear prosperous and full of promise, but this prosperity conceals a grim human cost. Over the decades of the Victorian era, coal miners became the unsung backbone of Britain's industrial might. The energy they extracted fueled economic growth, technological progress, and global expansion. Yet their lives were marred by hardship, danger, and social inequality. The reforms born out of miners' struggles, the Mines Act, the establishment of inspection systems, the rise of unions, slowly improved working conditions. But progress was incremental, and many miners and their families suffered preventable deaths and illnesses. Major disasters like the Senghenydd colliery explosion of 1913, which killed over 400 men, exposed the brutal realities of mining life to the wider public and spurred further reforms. The coal miner's story is a reminder that behind every grand historical narrative lies countless tales of ordinary people laboring in near invisibility. Their resilience and sacrifice shaped the modern world, yet their daily lives were far from heroic or glamorous. Instead, they were defined by endurance of monotony, risk, and limited opportunities. Today, as industries shift away from fossil fuels and societies reckon with environmental and social justice issues, reflecting on Victorian coal miners offers valuable lessons. It encourages recognition of labor's value beyond economic output, the importance of workplace safety, and the human impact of industrial progress. Would you have had the strength to survive a day in the Victorian coal mines? Perhaps not physically or emotionally. Yet understanding their endurance sheds light on the complexities of industrial history, revealing how boring and brutal work underpinned extraordinary societal change. Imagine yourself waking before dawn in a stone-built monastery nestled somewhere in medieval Europe, perhaps in England, France, or Germany, between the 12th and 14th centuries. The world outside is slowly stirring, but inside these thick walls a very different rhythm governs life, one of silence, discipline, and ritual. Your day begins with the ringing of a bell calling you to the first prayer service, Matins. The air is cold and still, the corridors dimly lit by flickering candles. You pull on your coarse woolen robe, a simple garment that marks your status as a monk or nun. Silence is observed rigorously. Even your footsteps seem muted on the stone floors. The monastery operates like a finely tuned machine, each individual's role precisely defined. Life revolves around the divine office, a series of 8 daily prayers marking the hours from before dawn to late evening. These are chanted or recited in Latin, requiring memorization and devotion. After Matins comes Lauds, another prayer service, and then a simple communal breakfast of bread and weak ale or watered-down wine. Meals are taken in silence, often while a reading from scripture or church fathers is spoken aloud by a lector. The food is plain and modest, grains, vegetables, and occasionally fish, reflecting vows of poverty and humility. Following the morning prayers and breakfast, work begins. The Benedictine rule, which guided many Western monasteries, emphasized ora et labora, prayer and work, as the pillars of monastic life. The nature of the work depends on your monastery's location and wealth. Some tend gardens, others craft manuscripts, bake bread, or repair buildings. If you are a scribe, your day is spent in the scriptorium, a quiet room dedicated to copying texts. This painstaking labor requires steady hands, sharp quills, and careful attention to detail. Illuminated manuscripts, books decorated with intricate illustrations and gold leaf, are precious treasures created here, preserving knowledge for future generations. Outside the scriptorium, monks work the fields, raise livestock, or brew beer and wine. The monastery strives to be largely self-sufficient, producing much of its own food and goods. This work is physical but measured, performed in rhythm with the prayer schedule. Meals are again simple and communal, with silence and reflection continuing to mark the day. The afternoon includes more prayer services, sext and nun, and often study or spiritual reading. Evenings bring vespers, the sunset prayer, followed by a final meal called compline. After this, the monks retire, observing silence and preparing for rest, though some remain awake for midnight prayers. Your life is governed by routine, obedience, and detachment from worldly concerns. The monastery is a refuge from chaos, but also a place of strict discipline and sacrifice. Individual desires and comforts are suppressed in favor of spiritual growth and communal harmony. Could you adjust to such a life of regulated silence, repetitive tasks, and unwavering devotion? Would the absence of worldly distractions bring peace, or would the monotony and isolation weigh heavily on your spirit? How would your mind cope with the long hours of prayer and labor, the absence of personal freedom? This delicate balance between work, worship, and silence forms the heart of monastic existence, a way of life that shaped medieval Europe but remains foreign and challenging even today. Having settled into the strict rhythm of monastic life, you begin to sense the full weight of the discipline that governs every moment. The monastery is not merely a peaceful retreat. It is a demanding environment where obedience and hierarchy shape daily existence as much as prayer and work. Your day is marked by a strict timetable, where lateness or failure to observe silence can bring reprimand or penance. The abbot, the monastery's leader, wields significant authority, ensuring the rule of St. Benedict or other guiding regulations are followed rigorously. His word is law, and challenging it is unthinkable. Within the community, roles are clearly defined. Novices, newcomers learning the monastic life, are at the bottom of the hierarchy and endure the most grueling tasks, including menial chores and long hours of silent contemplation. Their path to full membership may take years, requiring patience and resilience. Monks or nuns who serve as scribes face mental challenges, hours hunched over manuscripts, eyes straining by candlelight, and the meticulous nature of copying texts demands both concentration and steady hands. Mistakes require painstaking correction. The pressure to produce flawless copies is high, given the value of manuscripts for the church and wider learning. Physical labor, though sometimes a welcome change, is often backbreaking. You might spend long hours tending to gardens, working the fields, or managing the monastery's livestock. This work is integral to the community's self-sufficiency, but leaves you physically exhausted. Despite the outward calm, internal tensions exist. The vow of poverty means monks relinquish personal possessions, which can be a profound sacrifice. Some struggle with feelings of isolation, homesickness, or doubts about their spiritual path. Mental health support, as understood today, was non-existent. Spiritual confession and counsel were the primary outlets. Monastic life was also deeply affected by the broader medieval world. Famine, war, and plague occasionally swept through regions, impacting the monastery's food stores and safety. Monks sometimes tended the sick during outbreaks, risking their own health. The church's power also meant that monasteries were political as well as religious centers. Monks often negotiated with local nobility, managed land holdings, and collected tithes. These duties required diplomacy and administrative skill, adding complexity to monastic roles. Would you endure the strict obedience, the physical and mental demands, and the isolation from the world? Could you find meaning in this structured life? Or would the silence become unbearable? Would you accept the suppression of personal will for communal and spiritual goals? These questions reveal the hidden struggles beneath the tranquil facade of monastic life, the quiet battles waged within souls committed to a life apart from ordinary society. As your days in the monastery continue, the steady cadence of prayer, labor, and silence shapes not only your body, but your very perception of time and purpose. The monastery, with its unchanging routine and spiritual focus, becomes both sanctuary and cage, a world apart from the chaotic medieval society outside its walls. Over centuries, these monastic communities preserved vast amounts of knowledge. The manuscripts painstakingly copied by monks safeguarded classical texts, religious works, and early scientific writings. Without their quiet dedication, much of Western intellectual heritage might have been lost during turbulent times. Monasteries also played a critical role in agriculture, medicine, and education. Their farms experimented with crop rotation and animal husbandry, helping sustain local populations. In infirmaries, monks practiced early forms of healthcare, mixing herbal remedies and spiritual care. However, the monastic ideal of withdrawal from the world also meant limited engagement with evolving social and political realities. Many monasteries became wealthy landowners, sometimes contradicting their vows of poverty. Over time, some communities grew distant from their founding principles, leading to reform movements and eventually secularization. For you, living within the monastery's walls, the daily sacrifices and routines reflect a profound human quest for meaning beyond material concerns. The silence and discipline foster a unique kind of inner peace, but at the cost of isolation and personal freedom. Looking at modern life, echoes of monastic discipline appear in various forms: meditation retreats, structured spiritual practices, and even the search for balance amid today's distractions. The monastic legacy reminds us of the power of routine, focus, and community, even as it warns of the dangers of rigidity and detachment. Would you choose such a life if given the chance today? Could the quiet persistence of prayer and work offer solace in a noisy, fast-paced world, or would the loss of personal agency and the strict confines feel too oppressive? The story of medieval monasteries is a testament to human endurance and the search for deeper purpose, woven into the fabric of history through the boring yet essential details of daily devotion and labor. Imagine you are a Roman legionary in the 1st century AD. part of one of the most disciplined and effective armies the ancient world ever saw. Your mission: to march hundreds of miles across harsh terrain, building roads, forts, and defending the vast borders of the Roman Empire. The glory of Rome's conquests masks a daily routine that is repetitive, exhausting, and meticulously organized. Before dawn, you awaken in your temporary camp, a simple arrangement of tents or wooden huts hastily erected after the previous day's march. The air is cool and damp, and your body aches from carrying a heavy pack filled with armor, weapons, rations, and tools. Each soldier is responsible for his own equipment, which can weigh between 60 to 80 pounds. The day begins with a roll call and inspection by centurions, the middle-ranking officers charged with discipline and order. Your weapons and gear must be clean and battle-ready. Any lapse can result in punishment. Once the camp is struck, the long march begins. You walk approximately 15 to 20 miles per day, stepping in formation alongside hundreds of comrades. The terrain varies: dusty plains, rocky hills, muddy forests, or sweltering deserts. The pace is steady but relentless. There is little room for rest or distraction. During the march, you eat simple rations, mostly hard biscuits called buccellatum, salted pork or fish, and occasionally dried fruit or cheese. Water is carried from known springs or rivers, but scarcity and contamination pose constant risks. At midday, the army pauses briefly for a quick meal and to rest, but the commanders emphasize maintaining momentum to reach the next destination, before nightfall. The day's goal is not just movement, but also the construction of roads and fortifications to secure the empire's frontiers. When you finally arrive, the labor begins anew. The legion constructs defensive ditches, wooden palisades, or stone walls. Each soldier knows his task, from digging and carpentry to setting camp and cooking. The camp's layout is standardized for efficiency and defense, with tents arranged in a grid and streets running between them. Despite the harshness, the routine provides structure and camaraderie. The soldiers share stories, songs, and jokes to ease the monotony. The legion's strict discipline enforces order, but also fosters unity and a sense of purpose. Your day ends with evening prayers to the gods, followed by a meager meal and a brief rest before the cycle repeats. Sleep is often interrupted by the sounds of sentries or the need to prepare for the next march. Could you endure this endless cycle of marching, labor, and strict discipline? Would your body and mind withstand the physical demands and psychological pressures of life as a Roman legionary? Or would the relentless routine wear you down, far from the imagined glory of conquest? As the days pass, the routine of the legionary life reveals its true challenges beyond just marching and building. Discipline is paramount. Any disobedience is met with harsh punishment, including flogging or even execution in extreme cases. The Roman army's efficiency depended on obedience and unity, which was drilled relentlessly. Fatigue weighs heavily on you. The constant physical exertion strains your muscles and joints. Blisters from ill-fitting sandals, chafing from armor, and the weight of your gear make every step painful. Yet retreat or slowing down is not an option. The survival of the entire legion often depends on each man's endurance. The threat of ambush or attack is ever present. While on the march, you must maintain vigilance, posting sentries and scouting ahead. The enemy, be they tribal raiders, rebellious locals, or rival armies, could strike unexpectedly. Night watches are exhausting, with little rest between shifts. Nutrition and hygiene are ongoing concerns. The limited diet often leads to deficiencies, while the lack of proper sanitation fosters disease. Dysentery, respiratory infections, and parasitic illnesses are common, sometimes decimating entire units more effectively than battle wounds. Morale fluctuates. Letters from home bring comfort, but the monotony and hardship test the spirit. Friendships among soldiers become essential for coping with isolation and stress. The legion's strict hierarchy sometimes breeds resentment, but it also offers chances for advancement to the most capable and loyal. The daily construction of roads, bridges, and fortifications is grueling but critical. These engineering feats ensured the army's mobility and the empire's control. You take pride in these accomplishments, knowing that they shape the very landscape and legacy of Rome. Would you withstand the physical pain, mental strain, and constant danger inherent In this life, could you find meaning in the repetition and discipline, or would the endless grind break your resolve? As you settle into the rhythm of marching, building, and fighting, it becomes clear that the life of a Roman legionary was more than just survival. It was the foundation upon which an empire was built. The roads you helped construct would last for centuries, facilitating trade, military movement, and cultural exchange far beyond your time. The discipline, endurance, and unity demanded by the legion created an army capable of conquering vast territories and maintaining control over diverse peoples. Yet this came at a personal cost. Countless soldiers suffered injuries, disease, and psychological strain, often with little recognition. The legion's legacy endures in modern military structures, engineering, and even language. The Latin terms, road networks, and organizational methods trace back to the daily grind of soldiers like you. Could you have survived this demanding life and contributed to Rome's glory? Or would the relentless routine and dangers have worn you down? Reflecting on the legionary experience reveals how even the most disciplined and powerful institutions rely on the boring, often overlooked details of human endurance. Imagine stepping into the labyrinthine world of the Ottoman Empire's bureaucracy in the 16th century, at the height of its power. Spanning 3 continents and ruling over millions, the empire's success depended not only on military might, but on a complex layered system of administration that kept far-flung provinces in check. Your day begins in the heart of the imperial capital, Constantinople, within a towering stone building where scrolls, ledgers, and documents crowd wooden desks. You are a low-ranking bureaucrat, part of a vast network tasked with managing taxes, legal matters, land records, and the emperor's decrees. The Ottoman administration is famously intricate, combining Islamic law, Sharia, customary law, Kanun, and local traditions to govern diverse populations. You must navigate this patchwork with precision. Your job might involve recording land ownership, Timar system, collecting taxes, including the highly structured devshirme tribute, or coordinating communications between the palace and provincial governors. The sheer volume of paperwork is staggering. Each province sends reports, requests, and petitions that require careful review. Mistakes can lead to loss of revenue or rebellion, so accuracy is crucial. You learn to read Ottoman, Turkish, and Arabic script fluently, as the empire's official Documents use a mix of languages and calligraphy styles. Meetings and audits consume much of your time, as officials check accounts and ensure compliance. Corruption and bribery are persistent challenges, with some clerks and local governors abusing their positions. You must be vigilant yet diplomatic, aware that political intrigue permeates even the lowest ranks. Despite the rigid hierarchy, your role is essential for the empire's stability. Without this bureaucratic web, the Sultan's orders would falter across vast distances and diverse cultures. Would you be able to thrive in this maze of administration, balancing precision, politics, and pressure? Could you endure the monotony of endless record-keeping while shouldering the immense responsibility of managing an empire? As you settle into the routine of your bureaucratic duties, the full complexity of Ottoman governance unfolds. The empire's administration was not just a matter of paperwork. It was a delicate balancing act of law, culture, religion, and politics. The Timar system, a unique Ottoman land tenure arrangement, requires your constant attention. Land was granted to cavalrymen called Sipahis in exchange for military service, but it was your job to record and monitor these allocations, ensure taxes were properly collected, and prevent abuses. Disputes over land ownership were common and often escalated to the imperial court. The devshirme system adds another layer of complexity. Every few years, Christian boys from the Balkans were recruited, converted to Islam, and trained for military or administrative service. Your paperwork must track these quotas and appointments, integrating them into the broader administrative framework. This system was a source of both strength and tension within the empire. In the palace, the Imperial Council, the Divan, meets regularly, issuing decrees that cascade down through provincial governors and local officials. You help translate these decisions into actionable orders, drafting detailed instructions and reports. The bureaucracy's language is ornate and formulaic, requiring mastery to avoid misinterpretation. Corruption remains a persistent challenge. Bribes and favoritism can compromise the efficiency of tax collection and justice. You navigate these murky waters carefully, aware that accusations could ruin careers or lead to harsh punishments. Beyond administration, you witness the cultural diversity of the empire reflected in legal pluralism. Different communities, Muslims, Christians, Jews, often lived under their own religious laws, with courts and officials designated to handle their affairs. Coordinating between these systems requires patience and a deep understanding of social nuances. Your days are long and repetitive, filled with sifting through documents, attending meetings, and managing correspondence. Yet, despite the monotony, you take pride in supporting a system that maintained order over vast and varied lands for centuries. Would you have the patience, skill, and resilience to work within such a vast and intricate bureaucracy? Could you manage the tensions and contradictions that came with governing an empire of countless peoples and traditions? Or would the complexity and pressure overwhelm you? As your work within the Ottoman bureaucracy continues, you come to understand how this vast administrative machine was both the empire's strength and its eventual challenge. The system allowed the sultans to rule over a diverse, sprawling realm for centuries, maintaining relative stability through careful management of taxes, land, and populations. The layered legal frameworks, combining Sharia with local customs, created a flexible but complex governance structure. This adaptability helped integrate varied peoples, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and others, each with their own traditions and leaders. Yet, over time, the empire's bureaucracy also became burdened by its own complexity. Corruption, inefficiency, and resistance to reform slowed decision-making. As European powers modernized, the Ottoman system struggled to keep pace, contributing to gradual decline. For you, as a low-level bureaucrat, the work may have seemed mundane. Endless paperwork, detailed records, and balancing competing interests. But these boring tasks were essential to holding the empire together. Today, remnants of the Ottoman administrative practices influence modern governance in Turkey and beyond. The legacy of balancing diverse legal systems, managing multicultural populations, and navigating bureaucratic intricacies remains relevant. Would you have had the patience and skill to thrive in this demanding administrative world, Or would the monotony and political tension have worn you down? Reflecting on the Ottoman bureaucracy reveals how even the grandest empires rely on the unglamorous details of daily governance. Picture yourself in Renaissance Europe, sometime between the 14th and 17th centuries, a time of artistic flourishing, scientific discovery, and political intrigue. Yet, despite the era's vibrancy, communication remains a slow and laborious process, especially when it comes to letters. You sit at a wooden desk, quill in hand, in a modest chamber, illuminated by the soft glow of a candle. Before you lies a sheet of parchment, carefully prepared from animal skin. The act of writing a letter is deliberate and painstaking. Ink is precious, quills must be sharpened regularly, and mistakes cannot be easily erased. Unlike today's instant messages or emails, sending a letter involves many steps. First, composing the message requires thoughtful phrasing, as letters often serve multiple purposes, informing, persuading, or maintaining social ties. Literacy itself is limited mostly to the educated elite, nobles, clergy, merchants, and scholars. Once written, the letter must be sealed, often with wax and a personal signet, to ensure privacy and authenticity. Then it embarks on a journey, sometimes hundreds of miles, carried by messengers on horseback, merchant ships, or through courier networks. Travel is slow and fraught with risks. Bad weather, bandits, or lost deliveries could delay or prevent the message from reaching its recipient. You might wait weeks or even months for a reply, leaving affairs suspended in uncertainty. This slowness shapes social and political life. Diplomacy requires patience. Alliances hinge on trust over long distances. Family news and business transactions proceed cautiously. Letters are treasured documents, often reread and preserved. Would you be able to manage the delays and uncertainties of this communication? Could you compose your thoughts carefully enough to convey meaning precisely, knowing there might be no chance to clarify misunderstandings? Or would the frustration of waiting and the slow pace wear on your patience? This slow, deliberate art of letter writing is a boring but crucial part of Renaissance life, shaping how ideas, power, and relationships moved through the world. As you continue your work as a Renaissance letter writer, you realize that letters are far more than simple messages. They are complex social instruments loaded with nuance, etiquette, and power. Every word matters. The language is formal and polished, with careful attention to tone and structure. A letter to a monarch differs vastly from one sent to a merchant or a family member. You study classical rhetoric and employ flourishes learned from ancient texts. Since persuasion and reputation depend on your skill, you also become aware of the layers of secrecy and trust that letters carry. Sealed letters could be intercepted by spies or rival factions, so codes and ciphered messages are sometimes used, especially in political or military correspondence. The postal systems of the time are patchy and unreliable. Some city-states develop official courier services, but many rely on private messengers or travelers. Letters might be carried from hand to hand, delayed in customs, or lost entirely. It's common to send multiple letters to ensure the message arrives, increasing costs and labor. Your social status hinges in part on your ability to maintain correspondence networks. Letters foster alliances, secure patronage, and keep families connected across vast distances. For scholars and artists, letters spread new ideas and works, slowly fueling the Renaissance's intellectual revolutions. Yet, the weight of this communication system also imposes limitations. The slow pace means decisions take time, misunderstandings can linger, urgent news may come too late. Patience and long-term planning become essential skills. Would you find satisfaction in this slow, methodical exchange? Or would the delays and uncertainties frustrate your ambitions and daily life? Could you master the delicate art of written diplomacy in a world without telephones or email? These questions highlight the overlooked but essential role of letter writing in shaping Renaissance society, an art both tedious and profound. As your letters travel across kingdoms, cities, and courts, you realize that this slow, deliberate form of communication has shaped the very fabric of the Renaissance. Without the painstaking effort of letter writers, the exchange of ideas, from scientific discoveries to artistic inspiration, would have faltered. Letters carried news of alliances, marriages, wars, and trades. They preserved personal relationships, despite physical distance, and connected scholars in a budding intellectual network. Figures like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo corresponded extensively, their letters revealing the slow unfolding of genius. The system's limitations also influenced history. Miscommunication and delays sometimes altered political decisions or prolonged conflicts. Yet the patience required fostered a different sense of time and expectation, one where anticipation and reflection held as much weight as action. Today, despite instant messaging and digital communication, the legacy of Renaissance letter writing endures in formal correspondence, archival records, and our understanding of the past. It reminds us that behind every historical event lie countless moments of quiet preparation and thoughtful exchange. Would you embrace the slow art of letter writing, appreciating its depth despite its frustrations? Or would the waiting and uncertainty wear you down? This tension between patience and urgency captures a boring but vital aspect of history. Imagine yourself waking at dawn in rural Japan during the late Edo period, around the 1800s. You live in a small wooden farmhouse surrounded by fields that stretch as far as the eye can see. The land is your livelihood, and rice, the staple of Japanese life, demands constant, careful attention. Your day begins with the crisp morning air and the call of roosters. The household is simple, with a dirt floor, paper sliding doors, and few possessions. Your family, often large and multi-generational, shares the work. Every hand is needed. Rice cultivation is a cycle of patience and precision. You prepare the fields by flooding them with water from nearby streams or irrigation channels, creating shallow paddies essential for growing rice seedlings. Then, with back bent, you plant young shoots row by row in the wet earth. This labor is physically demanding and repetitive. Kneeling in muddy water for hours is exhausting. Your fingers ache from constant exposure to cold and wetness. Yet this rhythm is the heartbeat of rural life. As the season progresses, you tend the fields carefully, removing weeds by hand, managing water levels, and protecting crops from pests. Harvest time arrives with equal intensity. Using sickles, you cut the ripe rice stalks, then bundle and dry them before threshing to separate grains from chaff. The rice harvest determines your family's survival and standing in the village. Taxes must be paid in rice or coin to local landlords, who control the land and your access to it. Failure to produce enough can result in debt or eviction. Life outside the fields is austere. Food beyond rice is limited. Protein is scarce. Villages are tight-knit, with social and religious rituals marking the seasons. Yet the farmers' lives revolve around the land and its demands. Would you endure the relentless labor, the dependence on weather and landlords, and the uncertainty of each harvest? Could you find contentment in a life governed by nature's cycles and social obligation? Or would the backbreaking work and limited freedom be too much to bear? This boring agricultural routine is the foundation of a civilization's sustenance and culture, a story of human resilience etched in muddy water and golden grain. As your days pass in the fields, the rhythms of rice farming shape not just your labor, but your entire social existence. Farming in 19th century Japan was inseparable from the rigid social structures and seasonal cycles that governed village life. You belong to a peasant class bound by tradition and the authority of local landlords or village elders. Though the land is worked by families like yours, ownership often resides with samurai or wealthy landowners. This system places you in a position of dependency and vulnerability, where failure to pay taxes or debts risks severe consequences. Seasonal changes dictate your work calendar. Spring brings planting, a time of hope and cautious optimism. Summer requires vigilance, pest control, water management, and protection against storms. Autumn is harvest time, intense and exhausting, when the fruits of your labor determine whether your family will survive the coming winter. Winter offers a brief pause, but is spent repairing tools, preparing seed stock, and attending to household chores. Weather and natural disasters pose constant threats. Floods can drown young seedlings, droughts parch the soil, and typhoons can devastate entire regions. Crop failure can lead to famine, forcing families into desperate measures or migration. Community life provides both support and social pressure. Festivals, religious observances, and communal workdays strengthen bonds, but also reinforce social hierarchies and expectations. Everyone's reputation depends on hard work and reliability. Your diet, while centered on rice, includes seasonal vegetables and occasional fish or soy products. Protein sources are limited and often reserved for special occasions, reflecting economic constraints. Healthcare is rudimentary. Illness and injury from manual labor are common, with traditional herbal remedies and local healers providing limited relief. Despite these hardships, rice farming is more than survival. It is identity. Your connection to the land, the cycles of nature, and the community defines your place in the world. Could you withstand the social constraints, the physical hardships, and the uncertainty of each season? Would the shared struggles and rituals offer solace, or would the relentless toil and risk erode your spirit? This quiet, demanding existence underpins centuries of Japanese culture, resilience, and tradition, an often overlooked chapter in the story of human perseverance. As the years unfold in the relentless cycle of planting, tending, and harvesting, you come to see how the life of a rice farmer shapes not just survival, but the very culture and values of rural Japan. The discipline, patience, and harmony with nature embedded in this labor resonate beyond the fields, influencing art, religion, and community life. The techniques perfected over generations, irrigation methods, seed selection, crop rotation, reflect deep knowledge and adaptation. These boring details of farming practice supported one of the world's most densely populated societies for centuries. Social structures, while restrictive, provided stability. The bonds of family, village, and shared labor formed a resilient network that weathered hardship and change. Festivals celebrating planting and harvest linked agricultural rhythms with spiritual life, reinforcing a sense of purpose and connection. Yet, the dependence on landlords and vulnerability to natural disasters also highlight the fragility beneath this seeming permanence. Economic pressures and modernization would later challenge this way of life, leading to shifts in land ownership and rural migration. Today, the legacy of the rice farmer endures in Japan's cuisine, landscape, and cultural identity. The story of daily toil in the paddies reminds us how human resilience is often rooted in the slow, repetitive work of tending the earth. Would you embrace this life of steady labor and community, finding meaning in routine and nature's cycles? Or would the hardships and limitations feel suffocating? This story of rice farming, though quiet and repetitive, offers profound insight into the endurance and spirit of a people shaped by their land. Imagine yourself as a servant in a large colonial American household during the 17th or 18th century, somewhere along the eastern seaboard. Outside, the colonies are growing, towns expanding, trade flourishing, and new ideas stirring. But behind the walls of the manor, life unfolds in a world of strict hierarchy, constant labor, and quiet endurance. You wake early in a small, cramped quarters, often shared with several other servants. Your clothes are simple, worn, and often hand-me-downs. Your day begins before the household stirs, lighting fires, fetching water, and preparing rooms for the family and their guests. The manor is a complex ecosystem, with roles ranging from cooks, maids, and stable hands to butlers and footmen. Your tasks are numerous and repetitive: cleaning floors, polishing silver, tending to gardens, mending clothes, serving meals, and running errands. Precision and discretion are vital. Your work supports the family's social status and smooth daily functioning. Your movements are dictated by the family's schedule and demands. There is little time for rest or personal matters. Mistakes or delays can result in punishment or loss of favor. Meals for the family are elaborate compared to your own sparse fare, usually leftovers or simple bread and stew eaten in solitude, or among other servants. Social interaction within the servant community offers moments of connection, but also reinforces the divide between servant and master. Your place in the household is secure yet marginal, your voice rarely heard. Would you endure the endless chores, the lack of privacy, and the constant watchfulness? Could you find purpose in unseen labor, sustaining a household while remaining invisible? Or would the loss of autonomy and physical toll prove too great? This boring world behind grand colonial walls reveals the quiet resilience and essential roles of those who lived in service, shaping history from the shadows. As your days unfold within the household, the reality of servitude becomes clearer. Long hours, strict rules, and limited freedom define your existence. The colonial servant's life is one of constant vigilance. Every task must be done precisely, every request anticipated, and any error quietly hidden. Your relationship with the family is complex. While you live under their roof and serve their needs, you remain distinctly separate. Social boundaries are rigid, and any overstepping can lead to harsh repercussions, from verbal reprimands to physical punishment. Yet some servants earn a measure of trust or even affection, a rare and fragile reprieve. Physical labor is relentless. You spend hours scrubbing floors, tending fires, washing clothes by hand, and preparing food over open hearths. The work is often exhausting and exposes you to hazards such as burns, cuts, and respiratory problems from dust and smoke. Your personal life is circumscribed, time off is scarce, and privacy is almost non-existent. Many servants live in cramped quarters near the kitchen or attic, separated from family and community. This isolation can weigh heavily on morale. However, the servant community itself provides support. Shared hardships foster bonds of friendship and mutual aid. Stories, songs, and religious gatherings offer comfort and a sense of identity beyond servitude. Outside influences, economic shifts, political upheavals, and emerging ideas about freedom slowly begin to permeate this world. Some servants dream of better lives, sometimes pursuing freedom or new opportunities in the colonies. Would you find strength in the quiet solidarity of your peers? Could you endure the harsh conditions and social limitations for the sake of survival or hope? Or would the weight of invisibility and labor break your spirit? This unseen world behind the stately manor walls reveals the essential, often overlooked human stories that underlie colonial history. As your years in service pass, you come to understand how your labor, though hidden and undervalued, sustains not just a household, but the social and economic fabric of colonial America. The smooth running of these homes allowed the colonial elite to pursue commerce, politics, and society, shaping the emerging nation. The limitations you faced, strict hierarchy, limited rights, and grueling work, reflect broader inequalities entrenched in colonial society. Yet within these constraints, servants developed their own cultures, communities, and survival strategies, passing down knowledge and resilience. Over time, shifts such as the rise of wage labor, changing attitudes, toward slavery and indenture, and the push for independence began to reshape opportunities. Some servants gained freedom or moved into new roles, but many remained trapped by circumstance. The stories of colonial servants challenge romanticized views of the past, reminding us that history's progress often rests on the endurance of those working in the shadows. Would you find pride in your role knowing it helped build a nation? Or would the sacrifices and hardships overshadow any sense of contribution? Reflecting on this life invites us to recognize the invisible hands shaping history. Imagine yourself waking in the dusty heat of ancient Egypt around 1500 BCE, during the height of the New Kingdom. You are a tax collector, one of the many officials responsible for gathering the wealth that sustains the pharaoh's court, temples, and armies. Your role is crucial yet tedious, balancing authority and caution in a land ruled by divine kingship and strict social order. Your day begins early in a modest home near the village you oversee. Records are kept on papyrus scrolls, and you carry tools like a scribe's palette and reed pens. Your job is to visit farmers and craftsmen, assess their production, and collect dues, often paid in grain, livestock, or goods rather than money. Traveling. Between villages under the scorching sun, you must be meticulous in your counts and calculations. The Nile's flooding affects harvests, complicating assessments. Overestimating taxes could lead to rebellion. Underestimating means less wealth for the state and personal risk for you. Interactions with locals require diplomacy. Farmers may try to hide surplus or offer bribes to reduce their burden. You must enforce rules firmly, but avoid provoking unrest. Your reputation depends on fairness, balanced with loyalty to the pharaoh. Records are detailed and repetitive, lists of crops, animals, and labor owed to the state. The bureaucracy is vast, extending from local officials like you to central scribes in the capital. Would you be able to endure the monotony of paperwork, the constant travel, and the delicate social negotiations? Could you maintain impartiality amid pressure from both peasants and superiors? Or would the tedium and stress wear you down? This slow, exacting work underpins the smooth functioning of one of history's great civilizations, a boring but vital story of administration and survival. As you settle into your role, the enormity of Egypt's bureaucratic system becomes apparent. Tax collecting is more than simple gathering. It's a cornerstone of state power and social control. Your reports feed into a vast network of scribes, overseers, and officials, all working to maintain the pharaoh's wealth and authority. You manage complex seasonal cycles. The annual Nile flood dictates planting and harvest times, influencing tax assessments. In low-yield years, tensions rise as peasants struggle to meet quotas that seem unyielding. Corruption is a constant threat. Some officials inflate tax demands to line their pockets, while others accept bribes. You must navigate these murky waters carefully, balancing personal integrity with survival in a system rife with favoritism. The social fabric is delicate. Taxes fund monumental projects, the pyramids, temples, and armies that define Egyptian greatness but impose heavy burdens on the rural population. Farmers toil not only to feed their families, but to fulfill their obligations to the state. You witness firsthand how this system shapes daily life, reinforcing hierarchies and dependencies. The pharaoh's divine status legitimizes these demands, yet beneath the surface, resentment and hardship simmer. Would you sustain your role knowing the human cost of your work? Could you uphold fairness in a system that often feels unjust? Or would the weight of bureaucracy and social tension overwhelm you? This story of ancient tax collecting reveals how the boring details of administration are deeply entwined with the rise and fall of empires. As your tenure as a tax collector continues, you realize that your work, though repetitive and often unappreciated, is fundamental to the stability and grandeur of ancient Egypt. The precise records, enforced quotas, and organized labor supported the creation of architectural wonders that still awe the world today. The Egyptian bureaucracy set early standards for administration that influenced future civilizations. The use of writing, accounting, and hierarchical governance systems can trace roots back to these boring but crucial daily practices. Yet beneath the surface of monumental achievements lies the story of ordinary people navigating burdensome obligations. Your role embodies the tension between the grandeur of empire and the realities of survival. Would you find pride in your part in history's great projects? Or would the constant pressure and monotony overshadow any sense of accomplishment? Reflecting on this life reveals how even the most dazzling civilizations rely on quiet, persistent work. Picture yourself in a sprawling factory somewhere in the Soviet Union during the 1950s, in the early decades after World War II. The air is heavy with the scent of oil, metal, and sweat. You are a factory worker, one of millions powering the industrial ambitions of a superpower intent on rapid modernization and military strength. Your day begins before dawn. The factory whistle signals the start of your shift, often 10 or 12 hours of repetitive, physically demanding labor. You stand at your station on the assembly line or operate heavy machinery, performing the same motions hundreds of times a day. The pace is relentless, governed by production quotas that leave little room for breaks or errors. Efficiency is prized, above all. Failure to meet targets can lead to reprimands, loss of bonuses, or worse. Safety measures exist, but are minimal compared to modern standards. Injuries are common, and the work environment is noisy, dusty, and poorly ventilated. You wear heavy, often uncomfortable uniforms and protective gear, though accidents still occur. Outside the factory, your life revolves around rigid schedules, imposed by the state. Housing, food distribution, and social activities are tightly controlled. The ideology of the time demands loyalty, sacrifice, and collective effort for the greater good. Despite hardships, camaraderie among workers provides some relief. Break-room conversations, shared meals, and communal celebrations offer brief escapes from the monotony. Could you endure the unyielding schedule, the physical strain, and the pressure to conform? Would the sense of purpose in building a new society outweigh the personal costs? Or would the ceaseless routine and surveillance erode your spirit? This story of Soviet factory life reveals how discipline and endurance underpinned a vast industrial experiment, boring yet powerful in shaping history. As you settle deeper into your role, the pressures of Soviet factory life become undeniable. The relentless drive for increased production means quotas are regularly raised, often without regard for your well-being. Speed and quantity overshadow quality and safety, leading to accidents and fatigue. The work is physically draining. Repetitive tasks strain your muscles and joints, while the harsh environment, poor lighting, dust, fumes, wears down your health. Medical care is available but often inadequate, and workers sometimes endure pain in silence to avoid being labeled unproductive. Your time outside the factory is tightly controlled. Housing is assigned by the state, often in crowded communal apartments with thin walls. Food rations depend on workplace performance, adding pressure to meet expectations. Political loyalty is constantly monitored, with party officials and informants ensuring conformity. Social life is limited. While collective events and propaganda aim to build solidarity, genuine personal freedoms are scarce. Fear of denunciation creates an atmosphere of suspicion, reducing trust even among co-workers. Despite this, moments of solidarity emerge. Workers form close bonds, helping each other with tasks or sharing scarce resources. Humor and storytelling provide brief mental escapes from drudgery. Would you survive the physical and psychological toll of this environment? Could you maintain your individuality under constant scrutiny? Or would the oppressive routine and control break your resolve? This glimpse into Soviet factory life reveals how endurance under rigid systems shaped an era, highlighting the human cost behind industrial ambition. As your years pass working the factory lines, you see how the Soviet industrial push transformed the nation into a global power. The machinery you helped operate fueled arms production, infrastructure, and technological advances that shaped the Cold War era. Yet, this transformation demanded enormous personal sacrifice. The repetitive toil, constant surveillance, and strict control over daily life suppressed individuality and personal freedom. Many workers carried unseen burdens of exhaustion, stress, and quiet dissent. The Soviet factory experience illustrates a broader historical tension: the push for collective progress versus the costs borne by individuals. It reminds us how large-scale ideological projects rely on the often invisible endurance of ordinary people. Today, as we reflect on industrial history, the rigid schedules and harsh conditions serve as cautionary tales about balancing productivity with human dignity. Would you have found meaning in this regimented life? Or would the weight of control and monotony have worn you down? Understanding these boring details deepens our appreciation for the human stories behind grand historical narratives. Imagine yourself in Versailles during the reign of Louis XIV, the Sun King, in the late 17th or early 18th century. You serve as a mid-level court official, one of many tasked with managing the endless affairs of the royal household and government. Your days are a far cry from the glamour often associated with palace life. Instead, they are filled with tedious paperwork, strict protocol, and delicate social maneuvering. Your waking hours revolve around the demands of protocol. Every meeting, appointment, and event follows a rigid schedule. Attire, greetings, seating arrangements, all meticulously prescribed. You must know where to be, when, and with whom, lest you offend powerful nobles or the king himself. The bulk of your work involves managing petitions, correspondence, and administrative records. Documents must be copied, filed, and delivered with precision. Mistakes can carry severe consequences, damaging reputations and careers. The atmosphere is one of constant scrutiny. Gossip and intrigue swirl around the gilded halls, and alliances are fragile. You must navigate this with caution, maintaining favor without overstepping bounds. Despite the ornate surroundings, lavish tapestries, chandeliers, and gardens, your daily tasks are repetitive and unglamorous. Meals, while abundant, are often formal affairs requiring careful attention to etiquette. Could you endure the monotony and pressure of such a role, where survival depends on patience and social skill rather than power? Would the endless rituals and cautious diplomacy become routine or stifle your spirit? This story reveals how the foundations of royal power rested on the boring but vital labor of countless officials working behind the scenes. As you settle deeper into your role at the French court, you find that success hinges on mastering the intricate dance of protocol and politics. Every interaction requires careful calculation, how to address a superior, when to speak and what to say, all governed by unwritten rules learned through experience. Your office is a hive of activity, where courtiers send and receive endless letters and petitions. You must prioritize tasks, respond to demands promptly, and maintain detailed records. Bureaucratic delays can cause frustration, but haste risks mistakes and offense. Beyond paperwork, you are constantly alert to shifting alliances. Court life is rife with gossip and rivalry. One misstep can lead to disgrace or dismissal. You learn to mask your true opinions and ambitions, cultivating relationships discreetly. The repetitive nature of your work can be draining. Days blend together in a cycle of meetings, documents, and social obligations. Yet ambition pushes you to seek favor, promotions, or opportunities to serve more influential patrons. Outside the palace, life is constrained by your status and expectations. Freedom is limited, and personal desires are often subordinated to duty. Would you have the patience and tact to thrive in this environment? Could you sustain your motivation amid monotony and subtle dangers? Or would the endless social maneuvering erode your resolve? This glimpse into the daily life of a court official shows how the machinery of power depends on routine and restraint, far from the dazzling public ceremonies. As your service continues, you come to realize that while your daily tasks may seem dull and repetitive, they form the backbone of royal authority. The smooth functioning of court administration enables the king's decrees to be carried out, shaping France's politics and culture. Your role, though behind the scenes, wields quiet influence. By managing information, coordinating communication, and enforcing protocol, you help maintain the delicate balance of power in one of Europe's most opulent courts. The personal sacrifices, monotony, vigilance, and limited autonomy reflect broader themes of governance and power. History often remembers kings and battles, but the boring bureaucrats and courtiers preserved stability and order. Looking back, could you find meaning in this hidden work? Or would the endless routines have dulled your spirit? Reflecting on your experience offers insight into how ordinary endurance sustains extraordinary institutions. Imagine yourself as a young child attending a Prussian school in the early 19th century. The year is around 1820, and you live in a society where education is no gentle process, but a strict, regimented system designed to mold obedient, disciplined citizens. The schoolhouse is a cold, austere building with bare walls and hard wooden benches. Your day begins before dawn. The sharp ring of the school bell pierces the morning air, signaling the start of a day filled with long hours of rote, learning and harsh discipline. You quickly don your simple, uncomfortable uniform and prepare to face the unyielding routine. Inside the classroom, the teacher's word is law. Mistakes in reading, writing, or arithmetic are met with swift punishment. Beatings with rods or the dreaded cane are common. Silence is enforced rigorously. Speaking out of turn can earn severe reprimands. Lessons are repetitive and memorization heavy. You learn prayers, moral lessons emphasizing obedience and duty, and the basics of literacy and numeracy, often through monotonous drills. Creativity and individual expression are discouraged. Physical punishment accompanies psychological pressure to conform. Children are expected to suppress emotions and accept authority unquestioningly, all to prepare them for service to the state. Would you survive this environment of strict control and fear? Could you absorb lessons amid such pressure, or would the harshness stifle your spirit and curiosity? This glimpse into the boring and severe daily life of Prussian schoolchildren reveals a society prioritizing order and obedience, shaping generations in ways that echoed far beyond the classroom walls. As your school days progress, the relentless structure of Prussian education becomes even more apparent. The school day is divided into strict segments, each dedicated to repetitive drills, reading aloud, copying texts, arithmetic exercises, and memorizing moral and religious maxims. You quickly learn that compliance is valued over understanding. Individuality is suppressed in favor of uniformity. The teacher's gaze is stern and unyielding, and corporal punishment is an ever-present threat to maintain order. Lessons are often delivered in a monotone voice, while students sit motionless, expected to listen attentively and absorb knowledge without question. Group recitations and copying tasks fill most of the day, leaving little room for creativity or critical thinking. The social atmosphere is competitive, yet repressive. Students who falter or question authority are singled out and punished publicly, reinforcing fear and conformity. Friendships are cautious. Trust is limited under constant surveillance. Outside the classroom, children's lives remain regimented. Family expectations align with state goals, emphasizing duty, punctuality, and obedience. Education serves as preparation for future roles in the military, civil service, or industrial workforce. Would you find resilience amid this harsh routine? Could you internalize lessons through repetition and discipline, or would the rigid structure crush your natural curiosity? Would the fear of punishment overshadow the joy of learning? This boring but intense system reflects the priorities of a state focused on order and control, shaping not only education, but the very character of its citizens. As your time in the Prussian school system concludes, you recognize that its rigid methods have left a lasting imprint, not just on you, but on education worldwide. The emphasis on discipline, structure, and uniformity shaped a generation prepared for obedience and efficiency, traits valued by an expanding industrial and military state. The Prussian model became a blueprint for modern public education systems, influencing schools far beyond Germany's borders. While it helped increase literacy and civic order, it also drew criticism for stifling creativity and individuality. Your experience reveals a fundamental tension in education, balancing order with freedom, repetition with critical thought. The boring daily drills and punishments were designed to build character and social cohesion, but at what personal cost? Reflecting on this history invites us to reconsider how education can nurture both discipline and curiosity, an ongoing challenge for societies striving to prepare their youth for complex futures. Would you find value in such a system today, or would its rigidity feel outdated and oppressive? Understanding this past gives perspective on the evolution of learning and the human need for both structure and freedom. Imagine waking up just as the first light of spring touches the rugged, Scandinavian landscape around your homestead. It's the start of the farming year in Viking Age Scandinavia, roughly between 800 and 1050 AD. Your life as a farmer is bound tightly to the changing seasons and the rhythms of nature, where survival depends on careful preparation and hard labor. Your home is a simple wooden longhouse with a central hearth, where your family and livestock find shelter from harsh winters. The soil is rocky, the growing season short and the climate unpredictable.